In the first chapter, we are going to talk about candidate moves. The definition of a candidate move is actually a possibility that exists in a position. Compared to the computers that calculate and consider all the candidate moves that are in the position, humans, chess players, tend to consider 2 or 3 candidate moves and calculate them one by one. It's important when we calculate or we choose candidate moves to consider first the active moves, that moves that do captures, checks, or maybe attack another piece. That way we will be sure that we won't miss anything important in the position. When we calculate the candidate moves, it is the variations that arise after the candidate moves. It's very important to calculate precisely at the beginning of the variation. That's far more important than calculating the long variations, because if we make a mistake at the beginning of the variation, then those mistakes cannot be repaired. When we calculate and when we consider candidate moves, we also should consider the candidate moves that our opponent has. That way we won't miss any of the resources, defensive or attacking, that he might have. Once we finish with the initial calculation of the 2 or 3 candidate moves that we chosen in the starting of the position, and we are not satisfied with the outcomes of those positions at the end of the variations, then we should go back at the beginning and consider another possibilities or other candidate moves. In our first example of this chapter, here is a position between Hunt and Galduns. Here it's black to move, and I will encourage you to pause this video and try to find the best continuation here for black. As we can see here, black is attacking, and his rook on g4 is under attack, so as well as the pawn on f5. It's fairly easy to see that if black retreats the rook from g4, then his pawn on f5 will fall, and he will have quite some problems in that situation. That is why we need to choose candidate moves, the possibilities that black might have, in order to create something and not barely lose the rook or the pawn on f5. As we said before, we first need to consider the active moves. So the active moves are captures, checks, and attacks. The moves that come to mind are knight g3, knight f4 maybe, and queen takes h4. Same is as rook h4. Let's first see what happens after knight g3. Knight takes g3. Most logical for white is to take the rook on g4 with his knight, otherwise queen h4, rook h4 will be checkmate. So knight takes g4, and here black has 2 opportunities, 2 active moves. One of them is knight f1, the other one is f takes g4. If, for example, f takes g4, white can take the knight with his king on g3, and we can see that in the resulting position, white is rook up, so that means he's winning. The other option was for black to play knight f1. After knight f1, white has 2 options. One of them is to give check knight f6, after which queen f6 wins for black, since queen takes f6 will lead to a very nice checkmate with rook h2. And if white takes rook f1 here, then queen takes d4, c takes d4, king rook b3 check first, king g2, and black plays king g6, activating his king. The game can continue like with rook c1, white attacks the pawn on c7, and after rook d3, rook c7, rook takes d4, Black is winning because white cannot protect the pawn on d5, and that will lead to a position with 2 extra pawns for black, which is completely winning. Let's go back. So after knight f1, rook takes f1 is the best for white, not giving any checks with a knight on f6. F takes g4 and king g3. In this position we can see that black is pawn up, but the position is not that simple because there are queens on board, and there is a possibility of perpetual check on both sides. So here white is active enough to be able to call this position to a draw. If we go back, when we calculate this variation with knight g3, we realize that black has in the main line opportunity to get a position where he's equal or maybe slightly better because he had an extra pawn, but it's not very convincing. So we go on to calculating the second candidate move, which in this position we are going to take as the second candidate move, the move knight f4. After knight f4 check, black is taking a pawn, giving a check, so he's forcing white to play something to take the knight on f4. Of course, g takes f4 will lose immediately because of queen h4 checkmate. So the only move that makes sense is rook f4. And after rook takes f4, g takes f4, we can see that black no longer has any threat towards the white king, and that white remains with an extra piece. So we exclude this move immediately, because the conclusion in the resulting position is negative for us. If we go to the starting position, at the beginning, we considered one more move, which is a queen h4 check. It's another forced move, capturing and giving a check, so it's an active move that, of course, we have to consider. If we don't take all possible moves into consideration, we might miss moves like this. Black had a good game after knight g3, but as we can see that after queen h4, he gives a checkmate. Queen takes h4, g takes h4 is a forced move, and now we have this excellent sacrifice, rook takes h4. After king takes h4, rook h2 checkmate. Very beautiful position, very beautiful checkmate in the end, which was a result of this sacrifice, double sacrifice on h4.